Welcome everyone. My name is Stuart Schwab. I will be your presenter. I am a chemical engineer and a business development manager here at ChemStations. I've been with the company approximately 20 years. And today what we want to do is talk to you about some of the latest developments that we've been working on here at ChemStations for the next version of ChemCAD. Kind of all the changes that we've been doing are kind of done with the user in mind, making them more productive with the tool, which is the point of simulation in general. We set out to try to achieve this by reducing the time spent building models, running a model, and really increasing the ability for a user to analyze that model and really look at the data and what it shows them. We've gone about this in the next version of ChemCAD in two different ways. One, we've overhauled and rewrote much of the calculation engine, enhanced its speed, and all kinds of things like that. We will not be talking about that aspect today. The second aspect of the overhaul that we've done to achieve this is to update the user interface. We have gone about trying to make things simpler and easier to use, reduce the clicks of the mouse, make the software more friendly to touch screens, which is kind of the way the computing world is going. And all of this, as well as adding some new functionality into the user interface, like in the charting aspect of things. Some of this was started with ChemCAD 7, where we did a number of overhauls there. Kind of the conclusion of the user interface overhaul is to be seen now in the next version of ChemCAD. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today, the updated interface as well as the new charting functionality. Without further ado, we will start by looking at ChemCAD. First, let's look at ChemCAD 7. ChemCAD 7 were open, a simulation was running. This is what would be seen. Give it a second to load. So users will be familiar with this screen, including the text here on the ChemCAD Explorer and so on and so forth. Now let's compare that to the next version of ChemCAD, and here is what would be seen. Load in the simulation. You can see that a lot of the screen looks similar, and there are parts of the screen that are very different. First, let's kind of talk about the parts of the screen that are the same as what would be seen in ChemCAD 7. The ChemCAD Explorer on the far left of the screen really hasn't changed much since ChemCAD 7. We've instituted the smaller text, but that's really about the only change that you can be seen over here. Jumping to the other side of the screen is the palette on the right side. Again, nothing has changed. We introduced some new changes in ChemCAD 7. Those persist into the next version of ChemCAD without any real changes from them. Below on the messages pane, the bottom section across the screen, again, nothing much has changed here with two minor exceptions. The errors and warnings tab, which is down here at the bottom, shows the same information it did before. It has the same text label. However, now the actual text errors and warnings will change colors as an indicator for the user based on what happens on the screen, on the simulation. So if there's an error, just like unit op IDs turn red for an error, so will errors and warnings now. If the simulation converges, the errors and warnings will turn green. Again, just a visual indicator to help understand what's going on in the simulation. The second small change is the second tab. That tab is called Run Trace in ChemCAD 7. We've changed its name to Notifications here in the next version. The reason is it showed more than just Run Trace. It shows the same information it did before, but that is more than just the Run Trace stuff. So we wanted to make it more general term to include all of the information that it shows. The workspace itself also hasn't really changed since CHEMCAD 7. So where the big changes are done is really across the top. We've put in a ribbon and we removed the menus. Now, this follows more along the lines of a modern softwares that people would go pick up and install, like Microsoft Office and things like that. All of them have moved to a ribbon structure recently. We're following suit, following along with the Microsoft standards of building the ribbon and kind of grouping functionalities together. The home ribbon, which is the default ribbon, is intended to include 80%, maybe an exact number, but the majority of the things a user would do to run a simulation, from getting it started all the way through being able to, see what happens. There are other ribbons that include information and tasks that are not necessarily needed for every simulation, and or at least not done repetitively on a simulation. We'll kind of talk about all of these different ribbons real brief in this webcast. To get started, we'll kind of go through the home ribbon. The edit section was the first section that's seen. This is a very common named one that has very common functions like cut, copy, paste. It's very common to see that in the beginning, edit. Moving across from left to right now, you'll see that the ribbon is set up very similar to the menu structure that was in all of previous versions of CHEMCAD. To do a simulation, you kind of move from left to right across the screen. First, you'll set up the simulation by inputting the components, setting the thermodynamic settings and things like that. Once those are inputted, you need to do the specifications. How much of everything of each of those components that are needed in the simulation. Once the simulation knows how much of everything, the calculations are performed. That would be the run section of the ribbon. Once everything is calculated and all of the simulation has converged, then you can look at the results. So again, it moves from left to right across the ribbon. Looking in each of these sections in a slight bit more detail, each of the pictures, icons are functions / buttons. And if you're familiar with CHEMCAD, you should be familiar with what each of these buttons do. Instead of being from the menu, now it's a button here. Specifications. This one's slightly different. Instead of just being a button, it actually has two purposes. The upper icon is a button to edit the stream, but it also has a drop arrow here. If you click it, you can edit streams, edit the feed streams, or edit cut streams. So it gives you the ability to do additional functionality. Moving to the run area, it can be seen that some of this area is grayed out here on the dynamic area and some is not. Moving the cursor over the different commands and labels here on the steady state area, you can see that the tooltip pops up. These buttons are all active. I can push them and something happens. In the dynamic area, tooltip pops up, but nothing will happen when I click. Right now I'm in steady state mode, and I know this because I can look at the bottom messages or the status bar, and down here it says steady state right below the messages. If I want to move into dynamic mode, I can simply click the word dynamic, and now I've moved CHEMCAD into dynamic mode. The steady state buttons are now grayed out. dynamic buttons now work, and I can check the status bar at the bottom and see that I have moved CHEMCAD into a dynamic mode. To move back to steady state, I can simply click steady state again, and we move back into steady state. So this allows the user to easily move between the modes and then also access the run functionality, each type of run functionality, very easily and very quickly. The results section, we're actually will move from right to left in describing the buttons and options here. The report viewer gives a list of different options to view the results in. This has always been something that's been available in CHEMCAD. In previous versions, you would have found this under Tools, Preferences, and then Select Reporting. So there was a number of steps to get there. We moved it to more front and center for the user to be able to change how where I should say, the information is displayed. Very easily change it now. Moving over is the next section is property sets. This was something that was introduced in CHEMCAD 7. It persists, and we moved it here again for much easier accessibility than it was previous. You have a drop down of different property sets to select. You have the ability to edit them, as well as a toggle that turns on and off quick view. Reports and charts work very similar to each other. There is a button at the top for the icon to generate a report or a chart. The button that it is will be either the last report or chart generated or the first one on the list. What I mean is you see there's a drop arrow here. Selecting the drop arrow gives all of the reports that are available. If no report has been run yet on the simulation, then the very first one on the list, which is Select Stream Report, will be the icon that's shown. Once some report has been generated, that icon will change to whatever report was generated. This helps with repetitive tasks of generating the same report or the same chart over and over again. It changes that button to that report or that chart, so that way it becomes a much easier task to do. You don't have to go through the menus each time. Take notice though that the icons have changed, all been updated. They have been color-coded, so they're easier to find, and they've also been organized by a common functionality. So all of the streams are grouped together in the unit op, distillation, flow sheet, so on and so forth. Chart works very similarly. TPXY will be the button that is seen at the top, because that is the first one in the list. Once some chart is done, that icon will change. We've updated all of the icons for the charts. Again, group them for similar functionality to try to make it easier to find them, so on and so forth. Here, we will move out of the ribbon for just a quick second and look at some of the charting functionalities and see how the icon button changes. We'll run a phase envelope on just stream 1. So simply select the icon. Notice that that icon changes up here, asks us which stream do we want to do it on. We'll say 1, click OK. Click OK. And we've generated a phase envelope for this particular stream. When the chart was generated, it now shows up an additional ribbon at the top, a chart-specific ribbon. If we click the other ribbons, we'll find all of this information grayed out because they don't apply to the chart. Also, if we click on back to the workspace in the simulation, the chart ribbon goes away because it does not apply to this workspace. Going back to the chart, we can take a quick look and see this real visually that there's a much different look to this than there was in CHEMCAD 7. There's a lot more to it. We now have the ability to do multiple y-axes. Changing labels becomes a much simpler task. Assigning different series to which is on which axes is a much easier task. So a lot has changed. For today's webcast, we won't go real deep into all of the different functionality. Moving back to the ribbons, so that is the home ribbon. Now let's take a look at the other ribbons across the top. The drawing ribbon includes material, different functionalities that you would put on your simulation just to do enhancements. Drawn rectangles, adding stream boxes, unit op boxes. Previously, if the ability to add stream boxes and unit op boxes would have been found under Format, Add TP box, Add stream box. Now they are found underneath the drawing ribbon, as well as other things if you want to draw, like show to snap to grid, show grid, those types of things. The view ribbon has a lot of the functionality of the ability to how the material is displayed across the computer screen. Showing and hiding palettes, the zoom functionalities, whether or not IDs are shown, unit op names, things like that. Thermophysical, this is the ribbon that controls what components there are, what is the data behind those components, BIPs, electrolytes, all that, the data that goes into the calculations, as well as which calculations are being used. Component database ribbon has the controls which components are being used. Do you need user components? Looking at the different system databases, as well as pure property plotting. So thermophysical and component database would have been the equivalent of thermophysical menu in CHEMCAD 7. That's been broken up into two separate ribbons because they are a little bit different functionality between the two of them as to which each of them takes. Just to try to simplify a little bit so there wasn't so much in a single ribbon like underneath the thermophysical menu in CHEMCAD 7. And even these ribbons move a little bit left to right like the home ribbon does in moving through simulation. Your drawing and your viewing are kind of preview up, but thermophysical and component database, that's the beginning of the simulation where you kind of looking at the data for things. Specification, this is again more options to put in the numbers inside of the simulation on what the calculations are doing, what numbers the calculations are being calculated with. Some of this will be information from the home ribbon or duplicate functionality, but some of it is unique to just this ribbon. The analysis ribbon, I'm going to skip for just a second and moving across, and we'll jump to the sizing ribbon. Once the simulation is complete, the desire to do sizing of the unit operations to see how big everything is, you'd come to the sizing ribbon, and here is where all of the sizing routines would live. Same as the sizing menu inside of CHEMCAD 7. The tools ribbon would be the same as the tools menu inside of CHEMCAD 7. Doing data map, just general environment and flow sheet is the breakdown of the groups here. If you just have some different functionalities that lived under the tools in CHEMCAD 7, they'll be found here in CHEMCAD, in the next version of CHEMCAD. Now, to finish the ribbon, let's look at the analysis ribbon. This is a new ribbon that didn't have a menu before inside of CHEMCAD 7. Sensitivity, studies, optimization, and data reconciliation live here. They would have been found under the Run menu in CHEMCAD 7. Each of these sections is set up in a similar way. So we'll just talk about one of them, and the differences of, or the same thing applies to each of the different sections. Looking at sensitivity, there's the option to start or create a new sensitivity analysis. The rest of it is all grayed out. Once you either create a new one, or if one has already been created, select one from the list. The buttons then become active and more functionality is present. Delete, edit the analysis, rename, copy, run the analysis or plot results, all can now be done. To change which one, you can just simply grab the drop down and change which analysis you're looking at. This one's been done. I'm going to plot the calculations from this analysis to show another charting functionality and feature that has been added. When doing sensitivity optimization and data reconciliation, you have the ability to do 2 or more independent variables sometimes, depending on what you're looking at. When doing 2 or more independent variables and you want to chart those, we can look at now a 3-dimensional graph to see how those 2 independent variables look with the data that's recorded, how they appear. And so we can do 3-dimensional charts and scroll around, move again, play with the X, Y, and Z axes, labels, formatting, all that can be done now in the new charting functionality. Okay, moving back to the ribbons. That kind of concludes the ribbon aspect of the new features. There's just a few more things to look at here. On the status bar at the bottom, you'll find additional zoom functionality. Lower right-hand corner shows pan, zoom to fit, zoom rectangle, a zoom slider, and then just the ability to type in whatever zoom percent is desired. Clicking on the number brings up a dialog that it can be seen in. So this is where a quicker and easier way to get to the zoom functionality is, rather than coming to the view ribbon. Continuing, kind of going in a counterclockwise circle to the upper right-hand corner, there's some more commands here. This little caret will minimize and maximize the ribbon. Under minimize, the ribbon still pops down, but you can show it or not show it. Next to it is the style button. Style is something that Microsoft includes with all of their Office products. You can change the color scheme of the program. In this version, the next version of CHEMCAD, we have the light as the default, but you can change it to something else, to gray if you'd like. We have white, dark also. We'll change it back here. Next to the style button is the help button. While we wait for that to regenerate. If there's a need to access CHEMCAD's help files, the command for that can be found there. Continuing across the top, going over to the left-hand upper corner, the blue bar across the top with these buttons is called the Quick Access Toolbar. This is again a common way of developing or creating software to have this Quick Access Toolbar across the top. We have created these, or it created it with these buttons already displayed. Save, new, open, save, redo, undo, redo, and run all. Clicking the drop arrow allows the user to turn on or off any of these buttons, as well as click more commands and then add any buttons, any additional functionality as a quick access toolbar button that is just kind of a shortcut button at the top. The final area to look at, that we're going to look at today at least, is the File button. Clicking the File button takes us to this screen. In program speak, this is called the backstage of the program. Here, it can be found to close, open, save simulations, so all of the commands to open and close and manipulate files can be found here, as well as some other things I want to point out. The ability to change your preferences. In CHEMCAD 7, this would have been under the Tools menu, Preferences. Now it's moved to the space underneath, behind the File menu. The licensing screen can also be found here. And the final thing to point out for this webcast is the About CHEMCAD button. If dealing with support on an issue, looking at their simulation, they request what version of CHEMCAD is being used for the simulation. Click the File menu button, About CHEMCAD, and a dialog screen will pop up that shows which version of CHEMCAD is being used. This concludes a tour of the user interface as it's been designed for the next version of CHEMCAD.